Have you at least been having fun with High Evolutionary?
Yeah, I think he's good, but he's also like, he's very, very, you either win or you don't.
Isn't that kind of the game? Like you either win or you don't.
Yeah, but I'm saying like they either have the answers and you just lose, or you're doing ridiculous stuff. I don't feel like there's much of a middle ground with High Evo. If you look at like a Thanos build, right? Thanos is a very middle to lane card. I don't know. With High Evo, I don't feel like there's a lot of middle games. You're either blowing somebody out or you're just, they have the answers and you can't really do much. He's a fun card though. If they have Luke Cage, you have to have an answer or your deck just kind of stumbles.
All right, we're good. You ready, good sir?
I'm good, man.
All right, you know what that means. It's time, as always, to say welcome. Welcome on in, folks, to the Snapback Podcast. For those who do not know, my name is Guest, also known as ItsGuestGaming. That, as always, is DefaultDan, bright and early and on time today. Still not caffeinated, but on time. We are here. We did it. We actually got up and did the things, and we were successful. And I mean, I have coffee. I still got to get you on that, man. I'm telling you, you're missing out on quite a lot. Especially because I see those droopy eyes over there. You're like, yeah, I'm here.
Yeah,
I'm doing the thing.
I'm awake.
It doesn't mean you're here. It just means that you're awake, you know? So hopefully by
sitting in the chair.
Yeah, you're functioning, your heart is going, and that's what's important. Because hopefully by the time we get through the intro, you know, you've kicked in just a tad here, because we got a lot to talk about. Okay, the last 72 hours in Marvel Snap has been a whirlwind of highs and lows, because we recorded the last episode Monday night, 2 hours prior to the release of High Evolutionary. And
asterisk.
Yes. Asterisk. What's asterisk?
Yeah. Asterisk, the little thing.
An asterisk
that says
the little star.
That thing.
The thing above the number 8 as I check my own keyboard. Like, the asterisk. Yeah,
that one.
It's not a tesseract variation. Like, it's an asterisk.
Come on, man. I'm from the South. We shorten a lot of words.
That is not even shortening it. That's just straight up butchering it. Like,
yeah, that's how we do. That's how we do here in the South.
How we do. Okay, you proof in the pudding. So we'll talk.
Exactly.
We're going to talk about the High Evolutionary release, conversation, communication, but also now that High Evolutionary is now finally here, let's go into detail, kind of talking about, you know, first impressions, decks that we've liked and been experimenting with over the last couple of hours, because there's a lot to cover in that just alone. Then on top of it, we had some big OTA news, over the air adjustments that went live yesterday. Those also dropped on top of everything. And to put the cherry on top of everything, this entire week is a huge week for Marvel Snap. Not even just High Evolutionary, but looking at the entire Marvel Snap scene. It is a huge scene. Because think about it. You know, we'll go into detail, but we had events on Wednesday, today, which is Friday when we're recording this. There's events on Saturday, Sunday, Wednesday, 2 big events on Wednesday again. And then there's a lot to cover, which is going to lead to a big specific conversation that I hope Second Dinner hears.
Yeah.
So let's just dive right into it. Okay. Let's talk about High Evolutionary first, because obviously it's the hot topic for all of the right reasons. Because if you were in the Marvel Snap scene and, I don't know, hiding or under a rock or something, you may have noticed that there was a small delay for getting High Evolutionary out to the community. And I want to clarify a specific narrative that's going around, which is very, very incorrect. The game developers didn't forget to put High Evolutionary in the game. That's not what happened. That is going around, and that is 100% false. That was uploaded into the game, and the game data supports that. There was an error and glitch with how it rolled out, not the fact that it did roll out. So let's just get that out there into the world first, because it's fake news beyond all belief. And it's blowing my mind how many creators who have access to the information are spreading this fake news. That's not what happened. Okay. It was a glitch. on getting it to release, not the fact that it wasn't in the game. So if you've heard that, you've heard it corrected here, please, for the love of everything. All right. The game devs know how to upload a character into the frickin' game. They did it.
I think the thing is, like, we have to remember this OTA system, which is how they're most likely also pushing these cards into the game, is a new system. Like they just started OTAs. They just said the other day, like, hey, we are, we're installing this. We've had a couple glitches on the OTAs in the past as well, just based on timing and things like that. So there's a lot of that is connected, whether it's the exact same system or slightly different. It's one of those things where each week, yes, we've had some hiccups, whether it's been a couple hours or whatever. I mean, releasing cards is new in this game to be on that weekly schedule and being able to have the shop like we're seeing it, right, and different things like that. So there's definitely these pieces here where we have to give them a little grace as things come into the game. And I'm sure we're going to continue to talk about all the stuff, the communication, the responses, things like that. But it's definitely one of those things where so many people, man, it's all the whining. Like, I didn't get my thing that you promised me at this time. And
well,
I don't know.
Okay. So some of it is just, okay. Some of it is just, because be honest, it was in my opinion, probably the most highly anticipated release for Marvel Snap of the entire year, outside of maybe battle mode. Like, we were so hyped for battle mode to drop, just like we are getting very excited for Conquest to drop, potentially, if the calendar looks right in my head, possibly as early as June 13th, because that should be, as we'll talk about the schedule up ahead. That's what I'm personally projecting, tinfoil hat and all. But I can understand the fact that, look, we've all been talking about this card. The community has been super hyped for this card. Great big announcements. Ben Brode oversold the living hell out of this card. Like, this is probably their biggest, highest successful. Like, I don't even know how to. It's big. It's a big deal. And the fact that it didn't roll out also is what amplified it to be a big deal. If this was Jeff the Baby Landshark, even, we would not have had the reaction, the visceral reaction that a large percentage of the vocal community had. Now, like I said, it is just to a degree, because, hey, you say certain thing is supposed to happen. There was a bug, and then they're trying to get said certain thing to happen. And it straight up didn't. It didn't get delivered on time, but it did get delivered. And then some other piece of fake news that I kind of want to put out there too. Okay. And we've, as creators, we did start to communicate this the second we knew about it from, the Marvel Snap Creator Program. We have, again, for those who do not know, we are both a part of it. We are able to communicate directly with some of the devs to talk about, the release schedules and what's going on with certain pieces of information. And they kept us in the loop consistently in regards to High Evolutionary for us to communicate things out to you, the community. Now, with that said, they let us know that when the bug had been submitted to Apple, and they said, here's the fix for this. We need this as a client patch, which means a full upload, which you have to download to update your game to be able to fix it. Over the air means they could do it within the same current model client. There doesn't need to be something else in the back end, which is why there's a difference between an OTA change over the air and a client update. Very different style of change, obviously. That's when you have mechanics changing versus numbers changing. So numbers is just OTA, which is why you see only numbers typically on those adjustments. So when they pushed that out to Apple, that went out over 24 hours before it went out to the entire community. It went out to Steam, it went out to Google, and it went out to Apple. And then it's on them. It's on those three companies to push it through, approve the client update, and then push it to their stores. What happened was we all got that information. We spread it to the community that the devs have put out the solve. They had the fix in place. For a little over 24 hours, I want to say in total it was in limbo because Steam uploaded it first, then Google, and then Apple. And when it then eventually did get released, they said, okay, all three got approved. They can now go live. Steam, great, you're good to go. Google, awesome, you're good to go. Apple. And Apple was like out on a smoke break or something. And it just it took an extra 2 to 3 hours compared to the rest of the other clients.
It was a big big weight. And the other issue they had was, which only a couple people ran into and experienced it. If your Steam updated, your Apple no longer worked,
which is normal.
The apps can't be, you're right, because they can't be out of sync on your account. So I don't think that hit as many people. I know there was a couple people in the creator program that kind of said like, oh man, now I can't get in, but it was like one or two, and there's good many people in the creator program. So I'm sure it affected some more people outside, but yeah, I mean, it was definitely one of those things where as it rolled out, it was not on Second Dinner or any of those guys. I mean, essentially they did everything they would normally do with these patches. Apple kind of dropped the ball there. But they communicated to us, I would say almost every couple hours. Like we were getting updates like through this whole process of like, hey, we've done this. Hey, we've figured out what this bug is of, why. Hey, we've pushed this out. And so, most of the creators were also tweeting this stuff out, letting you guys know, because there's certain things we can and can't say from the program. But this was definitely one of those. They're like, hey, you're welcome to tell them, that this piece is here. And so, I don't know. I come from the dev side. I used to build indie games back in the day. I was going to say
literally. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, it's hard because from a dev, you never want to promise anything. It's the reason why they've never told us a time on OTAs or anything like that, because there's things that can happen. And so it's very difficult.
Or series drops.
Yes. I mean, that's the thing. Like they don't want to give a time because of the way this community is. And I say this community, I just mean gaming community in general.
Right.
Because we've seen it in other games where it's like, as soon as something happens, you get all the memes, you get all the tweets, all the stuff of saying compensation. And I struggle with that so bad because like, they don't have to give us anything. They built this game. We play this game. If something comes out a couple hours late or even 2 days late, oh, well, like, it's not like your life was changed because High Evolutionary couldn't come out the day he was supposed to drop, right? Like, I get it. I get the hype. I get all of that. And I'm going to have probably everybody in the comments being like, no, they should have. But
well, I mean, I can think of exclusively Kawa. But, that's just because Kawa built a subathon around the release of High Evolutionary and then had no High Evolutionary for the first 29 hours of his subathon, had to take a break, said, look, I'll just come back when he's back. And then he had to continue it again. But like that's an asterisk to the program because he is a very large creator, obviously, for the game. But I will say this, on the contrary to that, as a game developer, I hate to remind you that you are operating under the approval of Disney. And because of that, you are now, as a third-party licensee, you are responsible to uphold a lot of the Disney brand. And I can speak from that side. I can speak from the gaming side, and I can speak from the Disney side. And 100%, the way Second Dinner handled this, from a PR Disney background right here, they handled it as well as they could, which was communicating out to the community. Here are the updates. Look, it's not happening yet. It's going to happen potentially on this day. We have submit the responses. They've communicated to those who are on the inside in the Marvel Snap Creator Program, said, you can say this to your community. You can translate this to your community. They got it out. They put it out there. And then on top of that, as an apology, whether you got High Evolutionary or not, every single player in the game got gold on top of it as a, hey, we messed this up. We're sorry. Whether this affected you or not, we want the entire community to know that we acknowledge there's a mistake and we're going to make it right. Just like they did with the Kitty Pryde situation, they made it right, whether you got Kitty Pryde or not. So the same thing happened here with High Evolutionary. It was a small, like I want to say 30 hour, roughly 36 hour, whatever hiccup along the way. And then we got it. It's now here. And now we continue and we move forward from it. It was a learning experience for everybody. I know it's the favorite phrase, but it's, in many ways, very true. But just take this out of it from... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, and I'm glad that they did it. I'm glad that they gave us the quote unquote compensation, whatever. They didn't have to. And that's where I'm getting at is like, they don't, I wouldn't have expected anything. They did do that. I think that was awesome. And I think it was the amount that they needed to do. I think that they overkilled Kitty I get that they had to remove the card. I don't think they should have given everybody Kitty for free. Yes, people are going to also be upset about that remark, but it's one of those things where I think they overkilled their compensation for Kitty. On this one, I think it's right on, on par. I just look at it again from the people and the complaining and the things like that. It kind of gets annoying because like I could do the same thing now, right? And go, hey, I need an extra 200 gold because I'm on iOS. Everybody else got to play the card for X hours while I didn't, and so I need more gold for that. And I'm not saying that's what needs to happen. I'm just saying, like,
I agree.
That's what we continue to go down this whole path, and it's like, guys,
well, and that's why I think it's important to explain to the community also to say, this is what happened. Here's what they did. Here's what was in their control, what was not in their control. And they still took ownership of even some things that were not in their control, which is a great way to handle the situation, to explain it happened because of this. Even though we have submit and now we're waiting on them, we know that we wouldn't have even been in this position if it weren't for this mishap. So here's going to be here's the thing. Blah, 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 blah. They forced us to have to get a client update outside of regular scheduling. And you know what? Then it finally worked out. Now, as for those who got locked out with the iOS versus Steam update and all that kind of stuff, I mean, I was on that end of it because I was actually out from the apartment. So I had the old client and chose not to update until it updated on my iOS, and then I updated it on my PC. So I didn't play High Evo for the first several hours, but in my head, even as a creator who has 15 decks to test out, I still held off right from the very beginning because I knew it just was going to be unnecessarily chaotically not worth it. At the same time, to just start over, like putting that much pressure on myself to be locked out of the game on my phone because, well, I updated on the PC and then I got to do this later tonight. And it got all out of hand, and kind of like this conversation, but in a good way. So just take this as the wrap up from the how it got released piece. Okay.
Yeah.
The devs acknowledged that they messed up when it came to the programming of getting the release to happen, not the fact that the release wasn't implemented. Okay, it was in the game. Secondly, they apologized for it. They had an issue. They had a resolve for the issue very quickly, but then had a long waiting process, which was out of their control. They then proceeded to compensate the entire community for the pause and hiccup and need to update a client outside of normal cycle. And then continued on top of that to give us an awesome OTA on time with high amounts of communication as well, which we'll get to in a little bit, because I want to continue now talking about the fact that we have High Evolutionary. What do we now think? What is the first initial impression? I'll let you start on this one. Now that we have High Evo, your thoughts and impressions.
All my comments already, the community is already against me and all the chat, the comments, whatever that's happening, but
it happens.
High Evo. So here's you mentioned this is the number one card everybody was anticipating and all of that. I 100% agree. Everybody hyped this card up. It's going to change the game. He's a big bad. And he did change the way you use these other cards that are attached to him. They give you so many things to interact with. Because you don't have to use every single one of them with High Evolutionary in a deck. You get to kind of piece out stuff. He's a really good card. I'm glad that it happened like that. I think this also proves a few other things, which I'll get to after you kind of go through your initial thoughts. But I'm kind of still on the fence with High Evolutionary. Is he worth 6,000 tokens? Absolutely. He is worth the investment. Is he a card that you're going to get an 80% win rate with? Probably not. I feel like when you're going in with him, you either win or you lose. And I know when I mentioned that to you earlier, you're like, well, that's what happens in the game. And I get that. But I think the biggest thing that I feel with him is either you blow people out because they just don't have an answer for all the reduction that you're doing. And then you're dropping a cheap A-bomb into a giant Hulk. Like, he either blows you out or they have answers. They do things like a Luke Cage and you don't get your Enchantress, Rogue, or whatever to stop it. Or, they have a card that, pushes the power back up, whether that's, Shadow King messing with you or Valkyrie or
don't give away my secrets. God damn it, dude. That's mine.
So there's a few interactions out there that can kind of turn some stuff around with it, but it's definitely one of those cards where I don't feel like there's as much middle ground. I feel like he's not as volatile as Galactus, but I put him kind of in that range as of now. Now, again, we're going to talk about our decks in a little bit. I think there's some decks that have kind of started to, I don't know, ease that pain because they don't focus as much on that side of high evolutionary. But overall, I think he's a good card. He's a good card. He's worth the investment, but just don't think he's like the power level that everybody has kind of hyped him up to be, at least in my opinion. And I do think he will get hit with some OTA changes in the future. Maybe not specifically him, but some of the cards he touches, because some of them are ending up probably too powerful.
I'll agree with you to a certain degree. So first off, when it comes to, is he worth 6K? Like you said, yes, 1000% he's worth the 6K, because not only does he open up an entire new archetype, which I was pleasantly surprised with how well all of the cards plus, 4 others, roughly, whatever it is. I think it's 4 others, right? Yeah, 4 others altogether. When you put the entire deck together, it really, really does work. Like really, really well. I was really, really surprised. There were several surprises with getting the initial testing with High Evolutionary, and I think they're worth noting. First off, call it what it is. We all absolutely shit on Cyclops for...
He's so good.
I know, for weeks. All of us were like, oh my God, this is going to be so annoying with Cyclops, and maybe... Holy crap, is he like... he's probably my favorite out of all of them, maybe next to Hulk. But like Cyclops absolutely floored me with how consistent it's basically a amped up secondary Nebula Sunspot hybrid that you can then further amp. Like, I fully underestimated how amazing Cyclops was going to end up being, because, obviously the ongoing joke in the community for the last year at this point was everybody like loves Cyclops, and then he always got the short end of the stick. And then we all said it, and we all agreed that we thought this was one of the weakest abilities. Completely wrong. He's probably one of my favorites. Like,
he's rough because you can't interact with him. Like, he's not an on reveal. He's not an ongoing. And like all they have to do is say, so think of it like the Kitty Pride decks, right? Like, I'm just going to save 1 energy each turn. Yeah. And he's literally just going to light up your side of the board constantly.
You're straight up wrecked. Right. So Cyclops, biggest surprise for me overall. Shocker. I called it. People were sleeping on him. People are absolutely loving the cost reduction on Shocker. Called that one. Very happy about that one. Hulk, definitely, like, I love my Cyclops, but the beefiness of knowing how consistent I can get Hulk to even just 14 or 16, just the 1 or 2 turns is all you really need to get him to be like, truly Hulkish. And probably my overall biggest surprise out of all of the new cards is, because it's only the first several days, I'm not finding myself using Abomination as much as I wanted to, because everybody and their sister is running Luke Cage. And everybody knew it right off the bat. Everyone's going to run a Luke Cage. It is what it is. But I just don't see myself running Abomination the way I typically wanted to, because, like, kind of to the degree of what you said, it's either you have the answers or you don't. If you're running Luke Cage, you're not dropping that Abomination almost ever. If you can get away with like getting to turn 3 or 4 with a little bit of reduction expedited fast, and then get A-bomb down on 3 or 4, hey, it's a great day. It's a great day, and it's a bonus, but it's less consistent than I expected it to be overall. But I think that's only due to the fact that everybody's running the deck right now, and it's, Bootman did a poll, I did a poll, everybody did a poll in some way, shape, or form. We all talked about it. All our communities talked about it. Everybody's getting this card, so everybody's playing this card, and A-bomb is just kind of, he's suffering because of it right now.
Yeah, but I think what also hurt him is when we first saw all of these abilities, Wave still worked the wave worked. So when he was hyped as much as he was, there was we saw all these abilities before they touch wave. So if you think about it, like when that happened, there was this play of wave on 5 or whatever, right? And you had Abomination, She-Hulk, Death. Like there's all these cards that would have been like literally free on turn 6, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that wave killed Abomination. I'm just saying that when we first saw these and we were like, man, Abomination's going to come down for 1. We also had in our mind, like, there's these other ways of reducing it. And now we're to a point where like, it doesn't work like that, but he can still come down cheap. But to your point, if they have, and this is where I kind of go back to where I feel like he has these 2 different places. There's not really much of the middle, because if they have Luke Cage, your whole synergy, if you're building your deck around reductions and Abomination, all of a sudden just go, okay, you can have a 9 power on 5. And in our today's world, that doesn't feel great compared to if they don't have Luke Cage. You're like, oh, here's Abomination plus whatever on 5. And then they're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Then it hurts. Then it like, then it's really, really powerful if you get the combo to run off. But it's not consistent right now because everybody's running Luke Cage. Or other counters like you alluded to with Shadow King and the secret 3rd counter, which not many people are running right now on turn 5, which is Valkyrie. Valkyrie is a great play to undo a lot of the chaos, and then also to prepare for a great turn 6 too. But I gotta say, if there's anything to take out of this with how good these 7 cards now are, I'm going to get a lot of shit in the comments for this. I'm really glad that High Evo is a 4/4. And I say that mainly because all the other cards are so powerful. So I would rather have High Evo be a dead card in my hand or my deck to get these cards out versus weaken some of these cards to be able to have a high evolutionary. Like I wouldn't want Thing, for example, who I think is one of the targets for a future adjustment, for a future OTA, right? I wouldn't want Thing touched if I could leave high evolutionary as a 4/4. But basically Thing is a 4/9 on curve. Like you don't have to do anything else because those 3 rocks hitting, just pew, 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 like that's a really strong piece.
He works differently than the other ones. So if you guys haven't played with him, again, most people have him at this point, but all the other guys are worded that they will hit different targets, right? Whereas Thing can hit the same target. So he's so much better because even if they just have 1 card down, there's a lot of spots where like they just have 1 card down and it doesn't feel good to play Wasp because she's only going to hit it once. Right. But the Thing's going to hit all 3 of those on that 1 card. So yeah, and the other side of this is, right, like if we're looking at all the cards, the 1 card I feel like that I'm not seeing as much of is Misty Knight. I still think she's pretty good if you're doing that save energy kind of play pattern. But the hard part is if we think of OTAs, we think of changes, right? Like I think Hulk is a little too strong. I don't know how you make them slightly different because the problem they're going to run into is OTA changes on these cards are going to affect series 1 and 2. They're going to affect the very start of the game. So if you remember when we started, like Hulk was never great, but in series 1, Hulk was good because he was just like, well,
power slam.
And so, right. So like if you go, oh, Hulk needs to be a 6/10 because he's getting these pluses. Well, if you don't have high evolutionary, like a 6/10 is terrible because you would just run Chavez or some of these other cards. So I am interested to see as we get further into this, like if, and I do think some of these cards will get changed. I don't know what they are and I don't know how, but it will be interesting to see how they tweak these because of the fact that these are kind of staple cards in the early game.
I agree. I don't think they touch it as an OTA change. I think if big if, okay, if there were to be adjustments in the future on the evolved versions of these cards, it is not going to be with their power and cost. It's not going to those are going to stay as is. Those are baseline numbers that we use and they use as comparative numbers for, okay, this has no ability. If it goes over this number, it needs to have a negative ability or a chance ability associated to it. If it goes under this power number, it needs to have a positive ability at sacrifice for power. So that is not going to change. In regards to everything else, if they change anything, number one, I think they changed thing to only be hitting repeat this again, not twice more. I expect that. I think that one makes a lot of sense for the future. Number two, Cyclops with his when you end under, I would not be surprised if they switched that to being an ongoing, which I think would make a lot of sense for him to have it be an ongoing. So it could potentially be undone in some way, shape, or form. With Hulk, who is crazy beefy. That's the toughest one because I feel like it's the one that has the highest ceiling, but also has the least amount of room for adjustment because it's not like you could, if you bring it down to only being +1 for every turn, that's just absolutely nothing. That's just worthless.
Right.
And tremendously brings down his value. The only adjustment I could potentially see with him is that he doesn't update in hand. So it doesn't do like it does with Null, where you could have, for example, a Dracula synergy, which is one of the big plays with Hulk right now, which I love because we talked about it with Null from Loopy Fist, and the same thing you could do with Hulk the same way that it updates in the hand, and that's the number that you get absorbed. So that could, so it's like Morbius in a sense. I could see that adjustment, but that's like the furthest really you could really go with too much of any of this. Maybe Abomination gets a minimum of 1 added to him, but every one of these cards you could always make adjustments for. But the point is, even if they were to make these adjustments, High Evolutionary has opened up secondary variations of so many different archetypes and so many other cards now have secondary pieces that we adjust to them, you know, because obviously we talked about Luke Cage. So everyone has been running like the Hazmat Luke Cage combos, and it's a great combo. If you're going up against another Luke Cage, kind of sucks unless if you can undo it. But I think if there's anything I've felt very confident with, I don't know if you've experienced this yet either. The rise of Rogue, we were right on, because Rogue to me has been way more powerful than Enchantress, because you don't want to undo if you have your two Luke Cages on top of each other. I've seen a huge rise in Rogue, and I've seen a huge rise in Cosmo, because a lot of these abilities are not on reveal. You know, Cyclops, Misty Knight, and Abomination and Hulk, just put them on top of Cosmo. There's nothing you can do about any of them. You know, you can't undo, you can't kill, maybe a long distance, javelin toss from Killmonger, but that's a hope and a prayer. It's a really fun archetype. So I want to touch into like a deck that you've been testing and kind of messing around with, because it's combining two of the big bads.
And this is one of those things where like this deck is not revolutionary, right? There's a lot of people that are trying this deck. I mean, I want to say even like within the first hour or two, I know like Powell was playing it too. So like it's not like this I created a deck that nobody knows about, right? A lot of people are using this, but it is a lot of fun. So like when you look at this build, you're kind of going back into this Thanos Lockjaw, and you're only focusing on a couple cards, right? And to your point, the beauty of this card is not that I have to use a certain synergy or I have to use whatever. So this one kind of steers away a little bit of that. Hey, if you have Luke Cage, my deck stops working, because you're only using Wasp and Hulk. So if I go through the deck, right, it's Wasp, it's Luke Cage for that counter. You have Lockjaw to throw stuff back in and around. You've got Killmonger, Wave, High Evolutionary. I think Wave is one of those cards where I'm not sold on in the deck, but she's not terrible. You've got Dino, Leech, because Leech is killing a lot of these big cards on turn 6. I mean, if they're trying to do Hulk, you're removing those pluses. It's a really good card. Doom, Chavez again, just trying to help with making sure you're getting what you want to draw. Thanos, and then Hulk. So as far as High Evolutionary, it's just High Evolutionary, Wasp, and Hulk. but you're throwing things into Lockjaw to get your big cards out, which allows you to save energy to make your Hulk bigger. And the rest of the deck's pretty much what you've seen before. Killmonger to clear up some lanes from your stones that you're throwing around. But the thing to keep in mind is with some of that synergy, you do get the Soul Stone to give minuses. So the Soul Stone is actually kind of a sleeper, -4, one on each target if they have 4 cards over there, that if you are playing some of these other cards that are, you can slot in and out,
Right.
it ends up being pretty good. So I like the deck overall. It's I think a 50% win rate, 60% win rate, somewhere around in there. But if you look at cube gains, it's like 0.01 or something. It's not a huge cube gainer. It's nothing that's going to like surprise somebody on turn 6. So the deck is good, but this one just kind of allows you to not have to work too much on like not getting something, because no matter what you're doing, you are playing big, powerful cards in this deck. And it's going to work pretty well.
For that exact reason you said earlier, because there was something I wanted to clarify too, because you are running a Lockjaw variation on this, the America Chavez is going to get shuffled from the bottom of the deck every single time. The America Chavez could get pulled out of Luke Cage for those who do run the deck, because if you do not know, Lockjaw, even though it doesn't say the word shuffle, anytime you swap it with another card in your deck, it does shuffle the deck entirely. So if you wanted to build in the high evolutionary sense, you could very easily take America Chavez out and place in the Abomination, because you have that Soul Stone 100%.
Yeah.
Both of those would work. Just understand that if you have America Chavez, you have that guaranteed pull on 6. But if you want to just make it more evolved, you could also do Abomination in there too. And I just wanted to make sure that that was communicated, for how swapping and switching and mixing and shuffling, all of that works with America Chavez and Lockjaw.
And it's one of those things where like, I don't really mind if she ends up being on the top, because throwing in a Wasp and getting a Chavez back, like, sure. I'm good with
exactly.
that, but it at least allows me to make sure that all my draws, it just makes sure that all my draws, it's one less card I know I'm going to draw until turn 6. It allows you to also, which I think is an underrated ability now. It used to be like amazing, but then at one point people forgot about it. But like, I think it's amazing to know what you can do on turn 6. If she hasn't come up through Lockjaw, you know what your turn 6 play looks like ahead of time. On turn 5, okay, Chavez is coming. I have 9 power. And if I need to 9 power something, I know I can do it. So that's where like I think Chavez is really good in that spot. And again, I feel like over the last month or so, that's not really been a thing, because there's so many more powerful things you can do on turn 6. So people didn't really like Chavez. Usually was a throwaway card, but I think in this deck she works pretty well.
Yeah, she is she's still a meta card. Let's be honest here. She hasn't gone anywhere, and she isn't going anywhere. On top of that, I'm going to throw a little bit more of a fun variation where I'm working through all my testings, right? I'm working through all the 15 decks I created. And surprisingly, on day 1, the deck that did the best was one I'm not seeing anywhere. This one had I want to say it was like almost a 67% win rate. And it was one that was focused around Omega Red, which blew my mind. It's a hazmat variation because nobody expects Omega Red ever, for all of the reasons. I mean, let's be honest, all of the reasons. So the whole focus of the deck, which is Wasp, Hazmat, and Luke Cage, the dynamic duo, Zabu, Armor, Rogue, to try to potentially take away somebody else's Luke Cage, Wong, High Evolutionary, Omega Red, Thing, Typhoid Mary, and Abomination. So it is a very heavy negative deck, and you're saving that cheaper Rogue as a potential pull. There's no 6 drops in this, because the idea that you can stack up Omega Red, Typhoid Mary, and Abomination or Thing for tremendous amounts of power, and Wong is in there specifically for Wasp, Hazmat, and Thing for more super reduction in one lane. You can stack any of those on top of Wong plus Omega Red plus either Typhoid Mary and Abomination, and you're going to keep your power difference to get that Omega Red, who's typically a 4/5, to spread +4 to the other 2 sides as well. That's just enough as another card that has been giving a lot of like push you over the top lanes, because a lot of the cards here are not typically very, very strong. This is strong in the sense that you need one lane to be a big lane, and most of it you can kind of dance around, especially timing wise, so you don't get yourself into a negative Shang-Chi position. So you play that Typhoid early because you're baiting specifically Shang-Chi to pop early, and then you switch the priority because of it, because they put something else in the middle, and then A-Bomb comes afterwards because they took priority in turn 6. So it's been a really surprisingly consistent deck, and I want to come back to this more and more and more, because I don't know if the armor is going to be the best play or if a Cosmo in the future is going to be my better play. I kept going back and forth with it, but in this first variation, Omega Red and the Hazmat combo has been very consistent, and I want to preach this one to be tested out by some of the other big members in the community who love to do theory crafting testing, because it worked.
I think the hard part about the deck, right, and it goes to any deck. Well, if they have the answers, they have the answers, right? Like the biggest thing with this style deck right now is the fact that Luke Cage is probably in 70% of decks, right? And so,
which is why you rogue.
Yeah, right. But you also have to remember, you mentioned it before, Cosmo's making a big comeback, Shang-Chi's making a big comeback. A lot of these staple cards that disappeared for the last month and a half are back. And so, this is where, if I'm playing against the deck and I have Cosmo, Luke Cage, right, I'm hiding Luke Cage behind Cosmo. Like there's definitely a few answers. And again, every deck has an answer. So you can't just be like, all right, well, they have Luke Cage, because they may not have Luke Cage. They may not draw Luke Cage, right? There's 3 to 4 cards that you don't draw in a game. So it's definitely one of those things where I think it's interesting. I think it's a fun one. There are a few cards, like when you think of Omega Red, that you don't have in here. Not to say they need to be in here,
right?
But it's those Iron Mans, it's those onslaughts to make sure his pluses on other lanes are bigger. But I think it's an interesting build. Again, looking at it, and I'm sure the community in general, right, their first reaction is going to be, it's very fragile to that Luke Cage on the other side. But I get it.
Yeah,
and even a Valk. And even a Valk would be pretty bad on your lane.
This is true. This is true.
But, it gives a fun
2 different lines.
I always love that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, and that's why I was shocked by it, because it gives the 2 different lines of, you can just go the straight up like Wong Hazmat straight up beef up combo, but then because there were a couple of games where I did get Luke Caged. That's weird to say. On the other side. And then you're just spreading wide. And then it's like, okay, you still got a 4/6, a 4/10, and a 5/9. Those are still pretty beefy ass cards that, if you time it and spread it right, this is, I will say this, the one thing with this deck, it had a good win rate, but I wasn't snapping a lot, because you are waiting for turn 5 to kind of see specifically what they're doing on 5 to see what they're trying to set up for. And it's very obvious typically. So this isn't a high snap deck. This is a play it out strategy, take your time deck. This is one that maybe in the future I bring into a tournament with a little bit of tweaking in here. Maybe take out the Zabu or the armor and put in something different, like, Invisible Woman or something for a surprise factor. Like, I don't know. There's a bunch of different stuff I could do in here, and we'll get to Invisible Woman in a second. But I just wanted to showcase it because it was a lot of fun. Again, the 2 decks. So mine is Wasp, Hazmat, Luke Cage, Zabu, Armor, Rogue, Wong, High Evolutionary, Omega Red, The Thing, Typhoid Mary, and Abomination. And the deck that he was running is Wasp, Luke Cage, Lockjaw, Killmonger, Wave, High Evolutionary, Devil Dino, Leech, Doctor Doom, America Chavez, Thanos, and Hulk. So 2 very, very different styles of decks, which shows what High Evolutionary can do, which gives new life to new archetypes.
Yeah, and so the one thing I'll do, is we're kind of wrapping up on High Evo, looking at the OTA changes, is I think the biggest thing that I take away from this, and I know this is not going to happen right now, but I think this proves that we need more than 1 card. So again, my hot take right this second, we have the 1 card High Evo changing this many cards. So in my mind, this is not just 1 card came to the game and changed everything. You said, I'm saying, like, yes, High Evo came to the game and changed everything. But the reason why all of these decks are possible is that many cards changed, not just their power, not just their energy, they changed. And I think that that's one of the biggest things, is like, when we look at how do you keep the game fresh and moving and going and think, we had a month long, 2 months long of just 1 card at a time, And last month, I feel like was a very stale month, even though we had amazing, Hit Monkey, we had the bounce deck making a return, but we had a couple cards that just nobody really wanted. We had Snow Guard, we had Stegron, right? Like it was those kind of cards that just kind of like created this lull. And then we had High Evo go, hey, this one card changed 8. I mean, we had 8 new cards, essentially is what it comes down to. And we saw how much fun that the community is having. So again, I'm not saying this is a we need to do it every time or anything like that, because to do 8 cards a week would be insane. But it's one of those things where like this is where we kind of get into that conversation, which will be a future podcast, I'm sure, of how do they handle that and what do we do there? So
alliance archetypes, but we'll get to that. So
and going into kind of the changes of the game, we had the OTAs, which just hit as well.
Yeah, so we had the OTAs drop, and I'm not surprised. I mean, I'm not surprised at all that the top 2 adjustments straight up were Black Bolt and Stature. I mean, you had to have seen this adjustment coming, going 5.8 and 5.7. 5.8 down to 5.7 for Black Bolt, going 5.7 down to 5.6 for Stature. Mm-hmm. There's no way. I mean, there's no way they could have stayed as strong as they were. And what I love is between the actual patch drop notes that they put here, plus then a lot of the Q&As that were answered by Glenn in regards to the statistics and talking about why touch these cards, they made 2 things very clear. Number 1, Black Bolt Stature was outperforming Thanos decks in their prime and Shuri decks in their prime. So this creates 2 very specific conversations. Number 1, Darkhawk is less of the problem than we originally thought it was. And they continue to even talk about that in notes. If you haven't gone, take a look at some of the conversations in Discord or follow Marvel Snap News, for example, go take a look at the breakdowns from Glenn where they straight up says Darkhawk is still in a healthy place, but he got on the higher edge because of Black Bolt and Stature. But now with this being reduced, they're trying to steer people away from this specifically, which I love. And the second thing that it introduces is the understanding that our metrics from all of the, including Snap.fan, all of the metrics from all the sites are only a percentage of the information we know. Because on one end, we see the win rate percentages for certain cards like Hella, which we've talked about at length from the Snap.fan page, saying that it's the number 1 cube rate deck. I mean, a cube rate card when played. And Glenn straight up says, actually, number 1 was Black Bolt, number 2 was Stature, which we have to absorb that and take that as they know more than us, which we very commonly forget to do in this game.
Right. Well, and I've mentioned that before too, right? The trackers are amazing. The trackers are awesome. We've got a lot of big names using the trackers, right? So we see them all the time, streamers, things like that. We use them so that you guys can see the cards in the deck. It makes it easier for the stream. But all those trackers only see the people using the tracker and that person on the other side. And when I say person, that could also be bots, right? So like a lot of that data could be skewed because if you're hitting bots 50% of the time, it's taking in bots data into these numbers to say that, oh, we saw this deck. And if we all know bots decks aren't perfect, they're randomized and whatever. So like it's definitely one of those things where the data we see is very skewed compared to the data that they have access to, which is throw out bot data, only have people data, and have every single person ever playing Snap. Because we have to remember, like, the common person playing any of these games, like any mobile game, is not the person on Discord. It's not the person using a secondary app running in the background of your game. Like, this is true. So those are some of the things that people kind of, like, I won't say forget about, but they focus so much on one side of it. And it's just like the Discord people is a very small percentage of any game because it's extra effort to go do that. In a mobile game specifically, extra effort doesn't happen. They just want to play their game for 5 minutes while they're on their, their smoke break or whatever, and then go back. So
it's exactly, and it's 100% true. And, we complain about a lot of cards. We complain a lot of decks, like Galactus, for example. Everyone's like, oh my God, Galactus needs to go away for everything and needs to be nerfed into the ground. And blah, blah, blah. Galactus is still in a bad place and they're still looking at how to change Galactus, but not because it's still outperforming the metrics that they would like. But from this Black Bolt stature adjustment and all of the information that got said afterwards about it, just remember that piece of it, that they see and know a lot more than we might give them credit for. Just as a community.
Yeah,
just as a community.
And I would also say, like, I don't think these adjustments are killer. Like, I know there was so many people that like clickbaity videos, whatever, of like, oh my gosh, they killed these. It's like, it's one power.
I mean,
like,
we're both guilty of it, though. Let's be honest here. Well, like, we're content creators. This is what we do. One power. It's dead. Like,
yeah, it's like I don't think when you were playing Black Bolt and Stature, I don't think 2 power overall was what lost you a game. Like, it's what I go back to a lot of these OTA
We're gonna
changes.
find out. We're gonna find out.
So
I think we're gonna find out.
I think it's one of those things where it puts you back in the perspective of, is there a better 5 drop? Right? Like when you take away 1 power of something, that's what I think OTA changes do, is you look back and go, okay, is a 5 blah 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 good enough when they discard their lowest card, which is probably not the card they're playing. So like I definitely think it comes back into this whole thing of like, you have to rethink cards when you're building decks, but I don't think 2 power in some of those decks, which again, I don't think that killed the deck. I think it's going to be more of like high evolutionary is just now a better blah, blah, a better interaction with those decks. Because if you look at what those decks were doing, it was a 2-card combo. When you mention Darkhawk is a 2 to 3 card combo, right? Like that was the reason why that deck was so good, was you just slammed your deck full of a bunch of 2-card combos. And now people are looking at it going, okay, is instead high evolutionary plus Hulk plus Wasp, or is, these 2 or 3 high evolutionary cards better of a combo than that? So I don't think the OTA potentially or particularly killed them because of the 1 power change. I just think it's the meta change. Everything changed.
I think the combination will put it to bed for a little while. But don't expect it to completely disappear at the same time. On the other end of it, though, we got 2 buffs. One I'm totally about, the other one I never saw coming. One of them being Negasonic Teenage Warhead, which went up from a 3/4 now to a 3/5. And for me personally, because I love the card and I'm doing some really cheeky stuff with it for the tournament later today, I absolutely love that it got this little extra power buff, because it's trying to force people to say, look, there is a positive to this if you get it to stay on the board now. It's not just here, let me automatically Electra a random card, or Shang-Chi any random card. If it stays on the board, it has real potential value to it. I'm actually very on board with that one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think at the lower power, you had to play her in a lane you were winning. It's the only way she was going to give you any value, and it was hard to do, especially late game, right? Like early game, you throw her out as a 3, but then when you throw her out early, you run the risk of them throwing away something they didn't care about early. Whereas really where she wants to be is that turn, 5, 6 or something like that, to where you're not necessarily 6, because then you're not preemptively, but maybe 4 or 5, where you're preemptively saying like, hey, I'm throwing this here and now I've won it. And the only way you're going to win this is if you blow her up. And that means you have to throw away a 4 cost or a 5 cost, which are some of the biggest and best cards in the game. And so, I love this change. You probably could have even given her 1 more power. I don't know. It may have been a little too much, but I'm just saying, like, outside of a deck like a Surfer or something that can buffer like Blue Marvel, like, I think the 1 power is a good start, and we'll see what that kind of does to her. But I definitely feel like there was a lot of games when you were playing her on 4 or 5, she either equaled the lane or she just barely maybe had 1 extra power above that lane. So by doing this, I think it helped.
Yeah, it's enough of a swing. If you brought her to a 3/6, she becomes more important than a Tuma. And I don't know if I agree with that, but I see what you're saying. Even though there is a great combo there very similarly. Next up was one I never saw coming, and I don't know if anybody asked for it, but basically they nerfed Cerebro 2 by bringing Invisible Woman up from a 2/2 to a 2/3. And now Cerebro 3 might be slept on as one of the best decks in the game, because now you can hide that Cerebro even more so, whether it's behind a Cosmo or behind an Invisible Woman. You have so many outs to get that Cerebro hit to happen, because Cerebro 2 got the buff of the synergy between Hazmat and Luke Cage. So now, like, I don't understand what they did, why they did this one necessarily, but because they also buffed Hella Discard. Like, it just seems a little
I think it's
reasonable.
Just one of those things where they probably looked at the numbers, and because I mean, if you think about when did you ever really see her, usually when you saw her, it was her sitting in the Hella Discard decks, right? Like the MODOK, whatever kind of decks. And so I think, at least in my opinion, the reason they did this was her play and her play percentage has gone down over the last month or two. And they were like, all right, here's a card that went from being played, because we had the season pass with MODOK, right? Like, here's a card that was being played, and here's this giant dip. How do we make this dip maybe go away or level off? So I think that this was kind of, that's at least in my mind. I have a feeling they have a dashboard somewhere that's just like, here's all the cards. And whenever something goes super down or super up, it like red flags go off and it goes, all right, what can we do here? And I think that with OTAs, they've already said they're trying to focus in on those two extremes on OTA changes. And so I think that this is one of those that just a flag went off because her play went way down. And they're like, what if we give her one more power? Does that help her in any way? I think, to your point, it could help dramatically in with
no. We're sticking with
Cerebro.
dramatically. That was a great combo word. Like, it's with, dramatically from now on.
Yeah. With Cosmo and the Cerebro type deck, I think that that's a good play within there. Now you have to be careful if they have a Cosmo on their end, because Cosmo is coming back. I know whenever I see a Visible Woman go down, that's my first instinct, is just to literally throw a Cosmo in front of it. But I mean, you could also see the hidden Onslaught decks. Omega Red Onslaught decks, right? Because you can Invisible Woman and literally hide, and especially if you do it correctly, you can hide a Omega Red into Iron Man, into Onslaught all behind her.
Boom, boom, boom.
I know that's the Ben Brode special there, but like, I mean, now you have a potential, because that's one extra power that can help your Onslaughts too. So, or can help your Omega Reds too. So like, I think the change will be good overall. I don't think it's going to like make people go, oh, I got to go play it right now. But I definitely think it's one of those like, a good change. Nobody expected it, like you said. So
yeah, no one asked for it. No one expected it, but good change nevertheless. And then there were two other big announcements in the OTAs as well. One about OTAs themselves, which is the timeline, and then location changes, because they outright said, hey, we've heard you as a community. Yeah. We get it. We hear you. You're done with the restrictive locations. So over the last 3 months, we rolled out Plunder Castle, Milano, and Sandbar, and y'all don't like them, so we're going to take them away. And we're just going to go back to the drawing board. And I love that they did that.
And it's funny because the ones that they selected, right? Like, there's still cards out there. I know, like your favorite location, District X, and a few of them out there, right?
Just
like,
a guttural reaction. It just brings out the monologue in me. Like,
yeah, and we had these in the last patch, right, where they identified a few of them that were kind of annoying. We've got more over here. I think Sandbar is because this is not just, hey, these are the ones that we're going back and saying they're going to show up less frequently. Like they said, these are the ones we're going to go back to the drawing board with. And I think Sandbar makes a lot of sense now that High Evolutionary is here, because we're about to have 0 vanilla cards.
All the vanilla cards are now chocolate. Like, they now have flavor to them. Yeah. Sandbar means shite.
Yeah. So it's definitely one of those that it's very cool, awesome, different that they are really thinking about that of like, hey, we have these cards in these locations now that like people are not going to be able to play on. And like Plunder's Castle is definitely one of those, like, most games you can't play on it, right? Like, unless you have a bunch of 6-drops, you usually only have 1 or 2 6-drops. So you have to have it on turn 6. If they play any kind of like wave, you can't do it. So like, it's been a very, very restrictive location. And even then it's just like, it it makes you just who has the bigger card, right, wins that location. So I'm glad that they're looking at these three particular locations, and to your point, like Milano's brand new, so it's very interesting that they would just be like, hey, maybe the data was really bad though this month when it was the hot location. So
100% it was. Everybody was like, we're tired of this shit. We're done. We're just, take the day off. And they saw it go. I mean, I got to say, I got to thank Ordinary Harry specifically, because he is one of the most vocal out of all of the content creators about the restrictive location, like BS, because he's 100% right every single time, that there's only so much restriction that you should have. Yes, there are ways you can play into it or play around it, or if it's a known hot location, but it speaks to that same conversation of, I don't mind these locations if we know about them in advance, they're a featured location, and then they go away. Like, I would not mind seeing Plunder Castle come back again for another 24-hour hot location, but don't put it back into the rotation again. Like, that's how I think they cycle these locations in and out, is they kind of retire them and then they bring them back for a day as a featured thing, because then it forces the deck building, which is the point of a featured location. Is you want to play into today, you got a 50% chance to have this specific location pop up. Adjust your deck, get out of your rhythm, learn how to deck build, look up content. Like, it gives you further interaction with the game rather than deter you from the game, because they probably have more retreats when those locations pop up than almost any other. Unless if you're looking at my data and most of it comes off of District X, but that's just me. And then on top of everything, we actually got updates to the future of OTA in general. And we kind of expected it to a degree, like to upkeep with regular OTAs, every single week. It's a lot. And we'd like new shiny things to happen, right? We'd like more game modes. We'd like more cards. We'd like more, development and expansion of the entire game itself. So for them to take an off week integrated in this makes a lot of sense. So basically what they've said is we're going to be alternating the OTA weeks. So there's patch week, then an OTA, then a break, then an OTA. So it's not just patch and 3 OTAs. That middle one is now taking a week off. So that way they can gather more data to assess the OTAs themselves of was there enough of an impact? Because we've seen OTAs drop that were, as they talk about here, and also in some of the other prior questionnaires, OTAs are decided in advance sometimes. And it's just a release schedule more than anything else. And they're programmed to drop at certain times sometimes, where we saw this happen with some of the adjustments that affected Thanos, for example, there was another one that's eluding me off the top of my head, where we're all like, this is like a week late, or sorry, 2 weeks late. I forget what the other one was, but we've seen that happen is my point. And honestly, the only thing that makes me sad is from a content perspective, and that's exclusively selfish, knowing that, every Thursday there's always something to talk about. And now it's every other Thursday. So I guess we'll just work around it. But honestly, it's a good thing. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where you got to have it, you got to let it breathe. You got to give it time of figuring out what did the change do. So like an example, this week we have the whole Black Bolt stature change. And the thing is, a lot of people aren't playing Black Bolt stature right now. One, because they're playing the new card that dropped, High Evolutionary. So it's hard to determine in the next week if you only have a week of like, well, what did that do? And so when you're having to continually be thinking about, okay, what's the next card I'm going to change? It's like they're having to target these random cards and not really, your point, like you said, pay attention to the OTA that just came out, because you're having to think about what's next. And it's like they don't really get time to just let it breathe, because it'll be a couple days where whatever card got nerfed quits getting played. I mean, you look at Sandman, right? Sandman was everywhere. It got nerfed, and then all of a sudden he disappeared. And his nerf wasn't that bad, but it disappeared because everybody has that negative connotation about the card, and then he just goes away. So they have to kind of look and see and let it breathe. And I think this is fine. So it's essentially every other week is an OTA. And then on one of those weeks that's not OTA, we get a patch. And so, realistically, there's 1 week where it's not that nothing's changing, because we're still getting a new card in the system, end of the season. But Yeah, it's just those tweaks. I think it's fine.
Yeah, it's completely fine. But we've also seen the agenda that gets pushed out via these changes too, right? We see, hey, and they said it outright too, that we'll sometimes just nerf a card just to reduce the use of it, not because necessarily the card needs it because it's too powerful. They're just trying to lower the frequency of play sometimes with one power reduction here, or increase the frequency of play. I mean, look what happened to Venom. They gave him 2 power and Venom is everywhere now. And then I expect him eventually to kind of get balanced out at 3-2. But honestly, it brought awareness to destroy again.
Yeah,
with a little bit more life.
Other side of that, but I think the other side of that is Cosmo went away. So the whole thing, when you look at any card's rise or fall, it usually comes down to what else is being played in the current meta. I mean,
or not.
If you think about it, like Enchantress went away, right? Like Enchantress went away, and then all of a sudden Patriot was everywhere, and then all of a sudden Shang-Chi went away, and then all of a sudden these big, huge decks like Shuri and whatever popped up, right? And then it's just like, so you look at that, and right now Cosmo isn't being played or wasn't being played in the last couple of weeks. And because of that, you had the Venom and Destroy kind of make their rounds to come back. But now that Cosmo's back with some of this high Evo stuff, I anticipate the Destroy to kind of go away a little bit. So it's this cycle. And I think it's great. I think it's great that, you know, that happens. And I think a lot of it has to do with an OTA change, a card coming in, a patch, whatever it may be, that modifies these cards. And all of a sudden everybody wants to play that card. So like right now, Luke Cage is everywhere. So it wouldn't surprise me if at some point they look at Luke Cage again and go, we probably need to do something with him. Now, I don't think that's the case. I'm just saying if he's in 90% of decks because of high evolutionary, they're going to have to attack that situation some way, whether it's high Evo or it's Luke Cage or something. So we'll have to see though.
So I'm gonna tinfoil hat something on that exact topic too. I personally could see Cosmo getting a change in a future OTA for 2 reasons. One, he needs a counter that happens earlier in the game.
But he has one that doesn't work, aka Negasonic.
Earlier in the game, I said.
Yeah.
And secondly, I think that the known eventual card of Echo from the data mines also kind of breeds to the idea that Echo is a low cost card that can undo the ongoings from a location. So I expect Cosmo potentially to get something of that nature also. So I nominate, considering that they just nerfed Cerebro 2, what are your thoughts on making Cosmo a 2/2?
Making Cosmo come down earlier?
Making Cosmo come down earlier because just like Echo eventually will, you'll be able to take on the additional fact that you can Polaris it. I know it's a big tinfoil hat moment. I know.
I like the Polaris, but I don't like him coming down earlier, but I do like the Polaris to where you can move him. I think so. Here's the thing. Echo was kind of spoiled in some of the stuff, and we'll see if she ends up being exactly what they say she is right now. But the idea is, if you guys don't know Echo, when she comes down, if a card were to be played in that location, it will remove its ongoing. The problem with that card is, which is what a lot of people are complaining about, it's a preventative lane. But it's not I'm going to play this and now your Cosmo will get hit. They're just going to play Cosmo somewhere else. So I don't know. Like I foresee us getting another card, and Echo's not the correct mutant to do this with, but I predict we'll see something different in a card that just says it's not ongoing. Maybe it is ongoing. And just says all other ongoings won't work here. Like I think that's what we need as a card, and it can be dropped on 4, right? It doesn't have to be a 1 or a 2 or whatever, right? It can be dropped on 4 and shut off a Cosmo lane. It can be dropped on a Patriot lane on 4, 6 or whatever, right? Like I think that's the card we need in the game. I don't think it's too powerful, because if it's an ongoing, it can get removed with an enchantress or whatever, which I guess would ruin your lane. But like, I don't know. I don't know. Tinfoil hat, I could see him as a 2 for the Polaris move, for you to be able to move him to a lane they don't want him in. But
right. Considering move's going to be big next month, I could see that.
Like, I don't want Cosmo coming down early. That's my only drawback to that particular thing. So, and maybe they give us like a mini Magneto at like 4.
Like, yeah, somewhere between, I thought about that too, like a new card that's somewhere between what a Polaris does and what a Magneto does, where it moves one random 3 or 4 cost card to this location. What that looks like, which character that is, I don't know what that is, but I thought about it too. And I'm like, honestly, I don't think that that's the solve necessarily for Cosmo, because a lot of the issue with Cosmo needs to happen potentially as early as turn 3. And I think it needs to be a 3 cost card. So that's why I'm like, well, maybe we just reduce Cosmo, and that way it has another potential counter that can be affected in the middle of the game rather than exclusively on the final turn by 1 card, which doesn't do anything, because if you move over the Cosmo with Magneto, what are you actually opening up? It's turn 6 because it's Magneto. So it's probably the least counterable card right now in the game. And as that begins to become more and more prevalent, I think the resolution is going to need to happen with him somehow. What that looks like, I just don't know yet. But I do think that Cosmo ends up getting an adjustment at some point, because we're going to have a crazy amount of on reveals like we do with High Evolutionary, where people are going to realize the power of Cosmo and that there's literally no counter to him.
Yeah.
But
it's,
what do I know?
It's a hard one.
I'm just a content creator.
It's hard because it's a rock, paper, scissors, right?
Yeah.
Like ongoing reveal, destroy. I don't know what the third one is.
Static.
But I'm just saying, like, there's this rock, paper, scissors to where like Cosmo is to answer any of your on reveals, just like an enchantress or whatever is to remove your ongoings. Now, again, I know there's a non-bow here between these 2 specific cards, but like that's what they're made for. And so I don't know if that just means if Cosmo goes to a 4, maybe that's better. Maybe he's not coming down fast enough, then slowing him down is actually the answer rather than speeding him up to move him. Because again, if you put him in a 4-drop slot, you're, one of the big decks he was in was Shuri. So that kind of affects that deck a lot. A 4-drop, is taking the place of a lot of big cards. Whereas I feel like right now, what's the hard part with Snap is your 2 and 3 drop slot are your most open slots. You don't feel bad when you switch stuff in and out. So like if you look at your 2 drops, right, you have your Luke Cage, your armor, whatever. You can kind of flip around and you don't feel bad if you drew one or the other. 3s are a lot there. You have a lot of good 3s, but it's like once you get to 4, 5, 6, it's like those are your powerhouse finishers. And so to take away a Darkhawk, to take away something big in that 4 and have to replace it with Cosmo feels a little bit better. Plus it puts them online with Enchantress and some of the other cards that are doing similar things at 4.
Yeah. So, yeah, I could see that. I could see that too.
If I was going to
almost just as much sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
if I was going to tinfoil hat, I would go up.
You got to get one, man. I mean, they're incredibly fashionable and they're very durable. Yeah. Very durable, amazingly, for aluminum.
Oh, I know. I know.
All right. Moving past that conversation, because a lot of these changes heavily affect this next week. A lot of the changes that happen via OTA have affected several major events because we've all needed to kind of adjust to them. And it opens up a secondary conversation all built within it. So for those who do not know, we're recording this on a Friday morning. Later today, we have one tournament. Then on Saturday, there is another tournament. Then on Sunday, there is another WSF big event. Then Wednesday, we have Wednesday Night Snap on Snap.fan and Twitch Rivals showcasing Marvel Snap. In the future, We have SnapCon at the end of August. And I just think it opens up a very wide conversation of.
Yeah, and I'll caveat that real quick with there's other tournaments too. So I know there's another one over SEA area has one going off. We have, the daily tournaments on Snap Clash. Like, yeah, it's the community is blowing up when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, with the tournament scene in general, and there's two aspects to the tournament scene. And I promise this is going somewhere that will affect you heavily. The two aspects of the tournament scene that are blowing up are, number one, participants, right? We have the community tournaments. Yes, there are content creator tournaments as well, but both of them also lead to the second point, which is the audience, and that there is very clearly an audience that wants to watch Snap, not just from one person streaming and a one person perspective, but watching two people battle, whether it's two content creators or not, that work for the game or don't. That play for the game, and that's their primary game or not. It's irrelevant. It's the fact that all of this content is out there and is coming, that people are like, hey, we really want X, Y, and Z to be entertaining. We want this. This is my source of entertainment. It's not just playing the game. I love watching other people play the game. And it brings me to the conversation of spectator mode. Something that recently has been spoken about by the devs as not on their radar. And that's incredibly disheartening to hear that it's not a primary focus.
Yeah, it's on their radar, but it's not on their roadmap. So it's in no way form on the roadmap of them.
Until I see it on the roadmap, honestly, until it's on the roadmap, they're not thinking about it. Whether it's future, whether it's near, whether it's far, wherever you are, it doesn't matter. Okay. Right now, if we don't see that, and by the way, are we ever going to get another roadmap? Probably in June, but I hoped for one in May. No, it was every 2, but as we've learned, schedules don't matter. So, maybe we'll get one in June.
We had one this month. Sorry.
Not an updated roadmap. No, it was back when we first learned that Conquest was eventually going to come. I think that was March, but time flies when you're playing Snap. It's an issue that spectator mode isn't being pushed primary, in my opinion. And here's why. A lot of these games are not just successful based on play. They're also successful based on marketing. A game's longevity very often comes from what you do within that first year that is not appealing to just the content that you were already procuring prior to global launch. And I've watched this happen at Multitude, where they have content, and they've spoken about it at length in multiple different talks and GDCs, et cetera, that they have a year and a half, I want to say, of content already done in a way. And they're slowly, like they did it with the locations, they're slowly rolling out extra locations piece by piece and kind of, as we've seen, they're also changing them. A lot of characters have been data mined. We know they've been working on certain ones, and they've also got an entire library of Marvel Snap characters that they're never going to run out of to be able to grow and expand. So this takes it one step further, which is, okay, playing in the game is great. You're going to give us conquest mode, which is great. What is the next step? What is the step that makes people say, this is more than just a game. This is a culture. This is more than just an online card game. This is something that you don't just play, you can also experience. And it is an open conversation that I think we need to be speaking more, rather than just the content creator saying, oh, we'd love to have a spectator mode. Because I know there are games out there that have spectator modes with a lot of different variants of how you can do it, whether it's customizing them, etc. It's something that I think we should look at in the Marvel Snap community as a primary topic of conversation, because the devs are listening.
Yeah, and it's a rough thing because, there's a lot of things that Snap rolled out and did well, faster than other games. So for instance, we talk about when they released, and again, people are going to say, yeah, but they were developing it for 2 years, but the game changed a lot over 2 years. So you got to take that out. But if you look at beta into launch, there was a lot of stuff that rolled out very well. They had a lot of cards that came out. They had a lot of decks that was pretty balanced for, a long time. They brought in battle mode, which was great. I mean, if you look at like even Magic Arena, so again, I'm coming from the Magic side. Magic Arena, when it first rolled out, they didn't have PvP direct battles either. It took them a while to get that stuff kind of in place. So what they did with battle mode was great. Now they're in a weird spot with battle mode, and the fact that like you have to queue up with somebody and or be playing in one of these tournaments. So it isn't just a let me hop on and battle mode somebody. And it is a different mode than ladder, right? Conquest will somewhat solve this in the future. But yeah, when we get to these tournaments, there are, I would say, 3 different levels of tournaments. And this is again coming from my opinion, but I am helping in the tournament scene. I've got the Wednesday night snap, so that's just a casual format every Wednesday. Plus we have the monthly huge open. I work pretty closely with Alphos, which does the battle arena tournaments, which is going to be this weekend. And we look at the stuff, and when I say there's like 3 different levels, there's the first level, which is I'm doing a tournament, everybody play, fill out your brackets, whatever. So if you think of like Snap Clash, right? We're not streaming it. We're not really doing much about it. We're just facilitating a tournament.
Casual competitive.
Yeah. And those people are just filling out their bracket, and we'll see what the winner is. The second one is kind of where a lot of tournaments sit. And a lot of tournaments sit in this middle bracket, which is we want to show it, but the ability to get both players' screens, to understand what's going on fully, to do a lot of that stuff is near impossible. You end up with, all right, well, I've got bad quality because what they're pushing to me and what I'm trying to push out from my computer to the stream is fuzzy or blurry because of all of the different translations that are happening, getting to the stream. You've got things where it's impossible to get both sides to show their screen, so you only have one side. You're commentating based on that. There's the delay issue of, all right, well, how do we delay this? But talk to chat, which again, we have solved with the snap.fan stuff, but it's still not perfect, right? There's aspects of it. We can't click on cards to see, okay, how many cards are left in a deck? What is this location because it's slightly blurry? I don't know what that variant is. Like there's nuances when you're trying to do this live, and then the third level, right, is that super professional setup stream, which is only at this point invitationals that are like fully done to perfection. You've got 16 people. They know exactly how to share your screen. You've got layouts completely made to do that, which is not the public, right? It's 16 or maybe 32 if you're lucky, but usually they're like 16 or less, so that they know every little aspect of it. And what we've seen in there, which we've gotten some really great tournaments coming out of it, but you're looking at a very specific community. You're looking at, potentially things that are even recorded beforehand, like the one that happened a month or 2 ago. That was all these creators, maybe a month ago. It was all these creators, but it was pre-done. And then every week they showed so many matches of it, and it was like fully done up, and it looked beautiful. Like, don't get me wrong. The people they brought in were awesome. It looked beautiful when they were putting it up there, but it wasn't live. So if you're commenting and chatting, like, you're not interacting with it. You're just watching a pre-done game. So like when you look at those levels, what we want is we want that middle section to expand. We want that middle section to be able to say, here's the stuff. It's clear. It's both sides. I can click on stuff to figure out what's there, right? Like I can click on a card and it pop up just like if the person was playing where to do it. So I can talk about it, analyze it as a caster. I can check how many cards are left in deck or in hand of certain people. Like those are the things we want, because it makes it more enjoyable to the viewers, because the casters are trying to talk to stuff. And when a viewer's asking questions and you're like, well, I don't know what's in their hand. We don't know what the quote unquote best play is and stuff like that. So yeah, I think the evolution of this, if they want to get more people, not just watching a personality, if they want to like build this esports, they want to build this really place where the public wants to do it, then I think you need a true spectator mode to facilitate that.
And there are a couple of different ways, obviously, that they can go about that. There's open spectation, there's limited spectation, but there's a different UI essentially that has to be created as well if you're looking from the outside in, where you can't or can see both players' hands. And these are all things that they could potentially work on. What I think if I were to imagine, the Marvel Snap best version of a spectator mode, the pieces I would see it needing. Number one, the player who creates the room creates the limitations of what the spectator mode does. So they can say, yes, show hands, yes, show cards in deck, or, discarded, or kind of like we see with a lot of the trackers. Show those to the spectator in some way, shape, or there are options that they can be clicked on if you're a spectator. I could see that. I could see limiting your viewership. I could see, okay, have spectators come on in, but limit it to, 5 viewers, 10 viewers, 100 viewers, whatever it is. So it's something that can be controlled that way. If it isn't a tournament scene, that is something that, for example, we broadcast on snap.fan. That way we can say, hey, focus it to 1, share the code with just us, and then we put it into the template and it automatically broadcasts and we're able to see it and it's all preset and pretty and, all the masks and whatever, right? So there's that piece that needs to happen to it. And then lastly, delay, spectator delay, where if the match starts, its spectator mode has like a 90-second delay option, where you can watch, but it's on a 90-second delay. So that way we, as broadcasters or spectators in Discord or whatever, because even the Discord is now getting in on the tournament scene. The devs know, obviously, that there is a tournament scene for this game and there is a potential for its future. But it does require an entire user interface. So if that does happen, understand this. If we ask for spectator mode, it may come at the sacrifice of another new game mode because of how just the resources to be able to allocate from the second dinner team to develop the game mode. So you as a community then also have to decide, and it's something I want to hear from you all, in the comments, in the descriptions, in our streams, etc. Please let us know. Would you rather have a new game mode to battle in the game, or from an entertainment standpoint, have a spectator mode created? Because obviously as a creator, I want the spectator mode because it allows me to do a lot more. But as a player, I'm curious what the majority of the community would also say to that.
Yeah, so there's a couple other things, like you mentioned, limiting how many people can watch, essentially spectator mode. Now, that doesn't limit a stream because I can just stream what I'm watching, but I do think there needs to be a couple other things like invitation only, so I can invite somebody, or I have to accept you coming in or something like that. That way, again, the biggest thing with spectators, you don't want your opponent to see everything. Both hands and stuff like that. So I would agree with you. I think there's a couple limitations you have to build within there to make it worthwhile. And I would also agree that maybe Second Dinner needs a slightly bigger team so that they can have you 5 people or 10 people, whatever it's going to take. You guys focus on spectator mode so that the rest of the stuff can continue, on going and doing. And maybe that becomes a tournament, esports, whatever department of Second Dinner, and that's what their focus is. It's spectator mode. It's getting working with creators out there that are putting on these big tournaments. I mean, Twitch Rivals is massive, so for them to pick Snap to do this and pick the people that they did, I mean, again, hopefully as we continue with Snap.fan and the opens, we're building a big thing, and we can see 200 plus people joining into these tournaments every month, and we're hoping to get that even larger as we continue to grow. And it's just it would help, because right now I feel like we've got as good as we can get, right? Like at this point, there's no way for me to say open public, both sides have to share their game and kind of walk through that. It's just not going to happen with the public. So it's kind of like this phased approach of, if we could get that, it would make these streams so much more fun and clean. But I like your point there. that if they focus resources on this, then those resources aren't giving stuff to the general public, the people that aren't caring about tournaments and things like that. But you also have to look at it as marketing, because a huge tournament is going to bring in marketing and all of that. So it's a little bit of chicken or the egg as you're going through there of what do you focus on to bring more people in? Is it more stuff to bring more people in, or is it more exposure to bring more people in? You're kind of like already feeding into the point I was going to make about the expansion of the team, where if you do look to expand the team specifically to focus on, that user interface, that UI, and say, we're going to build a spectator mode. Okay. Say you bring on those 5 people, right? And I'm going to make up numbers, right? Say you bring in those 5 people and it takes them 6 months to develop the entire new game mode and the new user interface, right? You're bringing in those people at what we'll call a sustainable middle class salary. I'm going to ballpark, let's say 75,000, right? Not too much, not too little, but $75,000 a year. You bring those people in on a salary because they're not working per hour. You damn well know that. You bring those 5 people on in here, 6 months of work for each of them. That means to develop spectator mode, it essentially is going to end up costing them over $300,000 when all is said and done between bugs and rollout and official and creation and conception, et cetera. It's going to cost them over $300,000. So if you were to throw that out there, then you got to say, how do I get my return on investment? So now you look at it from a marketing perspective of, is that amount of money going to justify building this mode because we're going to receive X amount in return? And I think there are a couple of ways that can actually happen. Number one is Twitch drops. I think Twitch drops to gain awareness for the game, especially if they got it integrated with Twitch Rivals, which I would urge and push heavily for if they have not done this. For the love of God, figure out a way to do this in the next 24 hours from whenever you hear this. Like, my God, that would be astronomical for the game, because it not only increases viewership and marketing for those who are already in the game, it brings people into the game. And all you got to do sometimes is just get that door slightly open. We know from the data mines that there are newbie bundles coming to the game. We know about the success of the $2.99 Captain America bundle when you first start the game. We know the monthly pass for $9.99 is a great door opener to get people to start spending. The amount of retention that you keep and the amount of increase in which you get back from it, I think would justify that balance 100%. I think they would be more than able to double up, if not more, from that amount, given the financial records we can kind of find online based on App Store and Google Store downloads and purchases, et cetera, is over the past couple of months. So I think that the ability to do so is there. The question just becomes, is that marketing budget worth putting that much down for on what's honestly a little bit of a risk? Yeah, I mean, here's the other thing that I'll kind of like put in there, right? Is the fact that Ben Brode and the team, or not the whole team, but the original team, come from Hearthstone. Hearthstone has already rolled this out, and they rolled it out in 2014. So this would have been while Ben Brode was there. So he knows what has been built for Hearthstone. He knows what works and doesn't. And he also got to see the rise of Hearthstone, the rise of the tournament scene and all that. So that's where I'm saying, like, when you mentioned before, it's not in their mind, like it's not on their roadmap and stuff like that, on the radar. I believe it's on the radar for the full team. I just don't think it's on the roadmap, because I think what they look at is they go, okay, just what you're breaking down. Oh, this currently, the inception of the game was a 5-minute game that I can go and play and be done. If you compare it to Magic, you compare it to Hearthstone, like Magic games are an hour around easy, and a lot of those go to time. Hearthstone is probably half that amount of time, but it's still very long rounds when you get to the tournament scene. So now we're taking a game that goes from being a 5-minute sit-down game to a 40-minute round. That's essentially when we do all of the Snap.fan stuff. it's, whether it's the open, which tends to be a little bit longer because of so many people, or even the Wednesday night snap. I mean, some rounds are 40 minutes. And so they have to they're on this balancing line and on this fence of, are we going to now make this game more than just let me get in a match in between meetings or whatever, to I'm going to sit down for 8-9 hours on a weekend to do a tournament. And as soon as they do the shift to supporting tournaments, their game dramatically changes of what it is. Not to say you can't still play 5 minutes on ladder and do whatever, but we're already going to see with Conquest, we're going to start to see that shift. So I think what we're going to see is, with the release of Conquest, crossing the fingers, it's maybe next month, maybe the month after, it's around the corner. But I think once we get that release, they're going to start to see how long will people sit on this game. And if they'll sit in Conquest and we have a extraordinary amount of people doing it, we'll see that shift to them say, okay, the investment's there. They're also looking at all these tournaments. And like you said, we have so many tournaments this week.
Yeah. And I expect that to be consistent, because it's heading towards the end of the month, where we should end up seeing, hey, look, most of the new cards are done. The season pass hype is already down. We need to build more content. All right, let's do a tournament towards the end of the month, or let's do the World Snap Federation towards the end of the month, or let's do, this feature towards the end of the month to kind of squeak out also before the quarter ends. Like, I expect to see that pretty regularly. But the base of the conversation is, second dinner would benefit.
Yeah.
The question is, when? And I only worry that they put it on the back burner for too long.
Yeah.
Because say the marketing push, rescinds. Marvel's always going to be popular to a degree, but how far can they wait before saying, we're going to announce this as a second wave push of, you've got the beta players in, that's done. You got the global launch players, that's done. You've got the first 3 to 6 months of new content, that's done. How long do you wait afterwards? Because I've watched it happen. I've experienced it happen where they bring the big new content after that initial pre-programmed launch. They wait too late because now they're using it as a hope to bring in more players by opening a new game mode or opening a new thing. That's the last thing this game should do. And I believe the amount of experience they have on that team will be able to identify that earlier rather than later. But it's not being talked about really positively yet from the development community as something that they have this focus of in any potential radar, even if it's by the end of 2023. It's got to be something that pops up on the long-term radar, so that way we can say it's finally on the roadmap. Because as of right now, they've just said it's not their primary focus. It's not even their secondary focus. It's one that they just said, yeah, that'd be cool. They just kind of leave it alone. So I hope that really does push up. I really, really, really hope that does push up. So we'll see. We'll see. Fingers crossed. Yeah. If all works out with that. But I know I would love it. I love it.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where, again, like you mentioned, they have the experience. They know what worked well when it comes to Hearthstone. Again, they have insight on Magic and all of that as well, because
of course
Hearthstone was battling Magic. So like they have all the information. I think they know that it needs to come sooner rather than later, because again, these tournaments will eventually, not to say that they're all going to go away or anything like that, but if we don't get spectator modes, you're going to start to lose a lot of the mid-level tournaments. You're going to start to lose a lot of the small tournaments because they can't be streamed, and they're going to get overshadowed by the 1 or 2 big people who can put on these giant productions. But like we talked about before, that top level is usually invite only. So you're going to get rid of this public facing tournament, because one, I mean, I'll give you an example, Snap.fan. We do the opens. We get 200 people signing up and playing. I can only show what I can show. I have to literally ask people to jump in Discord to share their screen. And what happens is, if you're not getting good quality, if you can't get good matches, people don't watch it. So you get to a point.
Everybody's got different devices. They're different sizes. We can't make templates the same. Yeah, there's always hiccups.
Yeah. And so it ends up being this thing to where if a Twitch streamer or if a YouTube streamer or whatever can't support 8-10 hours of streaming stuff because their viewership is so low because they can't get matches or they can't get quality matches, I mean, that's where you go down. And then all of a sudden it goes back to the invite only tournaments are the only ones out there. And that's not what you want for this community. You want the community where anybody can become that pro. Anybody can go and show up to one of these tournaments, take it down, win $500 and potentially turn this into what they want to do as a quote unquote career as a, Marvel Snap player. So like that's what they have to kind of focus on. So yeah, I'm excited. I know it's in the back of their minds. Again, talking with some of the devs when we were at Snap Clash, they were, ecstatic about what we were doing there. And I'm glad they're starting to see this. I'm sure, like you mentioned before, like they've worked with Twitch rivals at some level to make this happen, I'm sure.
Oh, so 100%.
Like, so it's a good thing. And I foresee once Conquest gets out, that's going to be their push for the tournament scene. So
man, I hope it is. I hope it is. There's a lot to look forward to this week. There's a lot to look forward to this weekend, which is going to lead to a lot to talk about on Monday before you get into Marvel Scrap, your segment, which has been taking over really, honestly, very successfully over the last couple of weeks on your Twitch channel. And we'll be recording and trying to figure out how to condense all of this into a conversation for an hour on Monday. So tell us about Monday. Tell us where we can find you, what we do on your channel, snap.fan, and everything in between.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys want to check out the Snapback podcast live, we do that on Mondays over on twitch.tv/DefaultDan. We start that off, kick that off at 8 o'clock. So 8 p.m. Eastern is when we kick that off. And then we roll at 9 into what I've kind of started doing as a new segment, Marvel Scrap. We get 3 participants. As of now, a lot of them are content creators, but anybody can participate. And they argue out some arguments. So guests got to do it this last week with GC and Eddie, and it was a ton of fun. So they take something as simple as, best variant category. They make their arguments, but the chat is the one that actually decides the winner based on these arguments. So it's a lot of fun. After so many rounds, there's a winner. And eventually, I'm sure we'll get a tournament of champions, bring in some of these guys back. But it's been a blast. We've got 2 episodes down. We got the next episode coming up this week. And we've got Drew Barry. We've got Bootman coming on, and Brad Siffer. From the website and stuff. So it's a ton of fun. So definitely come hang out with us on Mondays, and then Wednesdays, myself and guests and others included will be hanging out over on the snap.fan Twitch. So twitch.tv/snap.fan, all spelt out, one word, where we do Wednesday night Snap. It's a casual 4 rounds of Swiss. You get to play some Snap, and then we got some cash payouts to give out to people with 4 wins and 3 wins. So ton of fun on that as well.
Yeah, it's free. Come hang out. We basically sit and talk and hang out on snap.fan and analyze the games that we're able to broadcast. And we always invite you guys to come be a part of that, whether you're spectating or whether you wish to play or whether you wish to play and share, whatever it may be. It's always a good time on Wednesday nights. As for myself, you can find me at twitch.tv/ItsGuestGaming. You can find me on Discord. You find me on Twitter, find me on YouTube, where this week I've got to start working on some Living Tribunal decks to get ready for the next character to drop into the game. We have so much content, man. So much content. I'm super excited for the tournament later today. Hopefully I'll be able to come back with some good news, because I'm going up against Eggs in round 1, and I think you're going up against What Am I? So I know we both have 2 very good players, and I just want to, and nothing against you, Eggs. I just want to win 1 round. That's it. Even if I lose to anybody afterwards, I don't care. I just want to win 1 round, just 1 round, just 1 round. So it's nothing personal, but I'm coming for you. So it'll be a good time. Hopefully we'll have good things to talk about. But I think, good sir, it is that time that we thank our audience. We say thank you guys so much for listening in today for the Snapback podcast, where you snap and we snap back. Thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
And y'all take it easy.
See, your timing's even better now. It's casual. You're getting it down. It's an outro. It's not just like bye, you know, and there's no outro screen. It's not a Twitch stream. It's a podcast.
I know.
Good job, man.
I know.
I'm proud of you.